This program is brought to you by Link TV for educational and non-commercial use only. Mosaic, a daily news program from Link TV, presents a selection of news reports from independent and state-controlled broadcasters from throughout the Middle East.
Iranian President Mahmoud Ahmadinejad called on the developing countries to unite in order to face what he referred to as the aligned big powers. During a speech in the opening session for foreign ministers of the non-aligned movement meeting in Tehran, Ahmadinejad said that the major powers are seeking to strip other countries of their rights to possess civilian nuclear energy. Ahmadinejad added that the big powers are continuing to store nuclear weapons and use them to impose their will on world's nations.
Meanwhile, the absence of the Egyptian foreign minister from the meeting indicates that the relationship between Cairo and Tehran is deteriorating.
It was a clear unanimous consensus displayed by foreign ministers of the non-aligned movement meeting in Tehran, where foreign ministers agreed that the challenges facing their countries are expanding and now come in many forms. Between the poverty, ignorance, and food crises that are threatening some countries and the threats to independence and sovereignty facing others, the Tehran summit is trying to prove the position of the non-aligned movement in the international arena and explore its future. The Iranian president considered the current crisis in Palestine, Lebanon, and Iraq, as well as his country's nuclear crisis, a model to what he described as oppressive international relations. Ahmadinejad called for building a new relationship among member countries of the non-aligned movement, a relationship that is based on solidarity and on political and economic reforms in order to counter the imminent threats facing them. However, Ahmadinejad stressed that change and reform must start from within the movement.
We must establish a large alliance for peace and equality in the world. When a country in the movement faces an aggression, the rest of the countries in the movement must come to its aid, using all peaceful means. God will not change that came upon a nation until that nation changes itself from within.
This call for a change from within as a solution for the movement to reclaim its world's position was not limited to the Iranian president, but other participants called for it as well.
The non-aligned movement was supposed to dissolve itself after the collapse of the Soviet Union. Then the non-aligned movement was an alliance between two powers, two camps, two methodologies, and two ideologies. Now, it's the movement of developing countries, which are currently facing many problems.
Some of the participants talked in an optimistic tone regarding the future, stressing the importance of not giving up in light of the movement's status quo.
5 years ago, the theory of one major power leading the world started to lose momentum. Another major power emerged in the international political arena. Consequently, the role played by the non-aligned movement is very important to maintain the political balance.
It has been announced that foreign ministers of the non-aligned movement will approve at the end of the meeting a final document calling for the implementation of reforms in the UN. The final document will also condemn the policy of sanctions imposed on member countries and the policy of military threats and accusations. In addition, the document will call for rejecting all forms of terrorism and for respecting human rights. A title without content, which will not make any difference in history. This is how some describe the position of the non-aligned movement. However, others believe that the hope to revive the non-aligned movement will continue as long as there's a will and good intention. Mohammed Hassan Bahrani, Al Jazeera, Tehran. As scheduled and in the same political context, the Syrian and Israeli delegations held the fourth round of talks in Turkey. What is different about this round is that it may shift the path of negotiations, carrying the two delegations directly to the bargaining table and without the involvement of the Turkish mediators. Today, both sides held the fourth round of indirect talks over the fate of the Israeli-occupied Golan Heights. According to Turkish officials, the two sides are looking into the possibility of moving the negotiations into a direct phase in the fifth and sixth rounds set to take place next August. Without getting into details, Israeli sources said that Syria has conducted ground operations during the past few weeks, which indicates that Syria is serious about reaching a deal with Israel. Despite the state of hostility between Syria and Israel since 1948, there have been brief cooling-off periods and ceasefire agreements between the two sides. In 2000, the two sides held direct talks in the U.S., but the talks collapsed due to disagreement over the size of area of the Golan Heights Israel was willing to return to Syria. On May 21, 2008, Syria and Israel revived the peace process after both sides announced the resumption of indirect talks.
من عمان ينضم إلينا دكتور محجوب الزويري الخبير في شؤون الشرق الأوسط.
We are joined from Amman with Dr. Mahjoub Zuhairi, an expert on Middle Eastern and Iranian affairs. Dr. Mahjoub, the main topic on the agenda of this round of indirect talks is the possibility of moving the negotiations into a direct phase. Is this possible?
في اعتقادي بأن هذا ممكن بالنظر إلى تطورين هامين. التطور الأول.
I think it's possible due to two new important developments. The political climate in the region could tremendously help the Syrians and the Israelis to move to direct negotiations. In addition, the internal situation in both countries and the troubling issues facing both sides are pushing them towards direct talks. However, I would like to mention an important point. It's not necessary that these direct talks, if they take place, will lead to major breakthroughs.
The Syrian ambassador to Washington, Imad Mustafa, called on ending the state of war with Israel. He also called on Tel Aviv to withdraw from the Golan Heights if it wants peace and security with Syria and Lebanon. In a lecture for a U.S. organization supporting the Israeli Peace Now organization, Mustafa said that his country is happy because the Israeli Prime Minister Ehud Olmert has positively changed his position in regards to negotiating with Syria.
Well, if we want to be idealistic, yes, we can ask, as an example, the Israelis to make a grand gesture and give us back the occupied Golan. But this is not realistic. What we believe is, look, we are two serious nations. It's not about grand photo opportunities or about exchanging niceties here and there. This is the state of Syria telling the state of Israel that we desire to end the state of war between us, to conclude peace between two states, and to recognize each other and to live as peaceful neighbors with each other within a normalized context. We think this is a very serious proposal, and it is far more important than any silly photo opportunity here or there, regardless of how much people like to have these, small things here and there. Here is the grand thing on offer. Let us sit together, let us make peace, let us end once and for all the state of war. What better than such
we're talking about a full peace for a full withdrawal?
Definitely, this is what we are offering.
Meanwhile, Israeli Prime Minister Ehud Olmert said that Syria is walking two parallel paths, the relationship with Iran, Hezbollah, and the resistance factions on one path, and the negotiations path on the other. Olmert said that the Syrians need to realize that it is impossible to walk the two paths simultaneously.
ورحمة الله تعالى وبركاته. Today we shed light on the latest developments in Somalia, where many people have started to question the future of peace and stability in Mogadishu and the rest of the country. This news comes as the transitional government and the opposition continue to hold talks from abroad. How can one interpret the latest rift between the opposition factions? And how can this split impact the general situation in Somalia, especially on the political, diplomatic, and security fronts?
يدخل عليه اتفاق السلام الموقع في جيبوتي بين التحالف من أجل تحرير الصومال والحكومة.
What is the future of the peace deal signed in Djibouti between the Alliance for the Re-Liberation of Somalia and the transitional government of Mogadishu? Is the security situation in Somalia leveling off, or is the country embracing for a new wave of violence? The following report highlights the latest developments in Somalia.
السلام في الصومال.
Peace in Somalia has become a dream beyond reach. The latest developments inside the Alliance for Re-Liberation of Somalia, ARS, indicates that the security situation in the country has reached a boiling point and it's likely to explode. In a surprise move, the ARS leadership based in the Eritrean capital Asmara has replaced the head of the alliance, Sheikh Sharif Ahmad, and 36 other senior officials. The decision has generated mixed reactions from the opposition in Djibouti and those based in Asmara. Sheikh Sharif Ahmad, once described as a moderate leader in what has become known as Somalia's religious courts, denounced the move. Sharif, who was replaced by Sheikh Hassan Dahir Awesi, accused Eritrea of meddling in alliance affairs. Dahir Awesi and his followers described the peace agreement signed between the transitional government and the alliance as a violation of alliance principles, which aims to expel the foreign forces deployed in the country. Meanwhile, the international community expressed fear and concern over the recent shakeup inside the ARS leadership based in Asmara. Many believe that the rift between opposition groups will likely jeopardize the peace process, leading to more violence in the country. The political changes on the ground have prompted the UN envoy in Somalia, Ahmed Wald Abdullah, to call for the immediate implementation of the Djibouti Peace Accord. Meanwhile, several international organizations issued warnings against the deterioration of the humanitarian situation in the country. This comes as international donors were only able to raise 1/3 of the $600 million pledged to Somalia.
To discuss today's episode on African affairs, we are joined in our studio with Jamal Abed Samad, Somalia's Deputy Ambassador to Iran. Mr. Jamal Abed Samad, welcome and thank you for joining us. The conflict in Somalia has shifted from a conflict between the opposition and the government to an internal conflict among opposition factions. How do you read into the conflict between the opposition factions in Eritrea and those in Djibouti? And how is the Somali government dealing with this factional split?
I would like to thank world leaders and my colleagues, including my dear brother Abdulaziz Artam. The main point here is that the Somali government does not want to meddle in the internal affairs of the opposition. Thank you.
How are you dealing with the issue? A split has emerged inside the opposition. There are some calling for the withdrawal of Ethiopian forces from Somalia. In addition, the opposition in Eritrea continues to denounce the peace agreement signed in Djibouti.
My dear brother Radwan, the vast majority of the opposition, nearly 99%, support the peace agreement signed in Djibouti. However, an Asmara-based minority group, which amounts to less than 2% of the opposition, does not support the peace agreement. As I said earlier, more than 98% of the opposition support the peace deal. The Somali government does not wish to meddle in the internal affairs of the opposition.
The Bengalis Revolution, the revolution of the hungry and the fireball of foreign workers. These were some of the headlines used by Kuwaiti newspapers in their reporting about the strike of the thousands of Asian workers, especially from Bangladesh due to rising living costs. The strike was ended after the workers reached an agreement with the Kuwaiti authorities after disturbances and violence.
هنا الكويت وليس دكة قنابل غازية
This is Kuwait, not Dhaka. Special security forces used tear gas bombs to disperse thousands of Asian workers who have been on strike for the past 2 weeks. The grievance of these protesters is about their low salaries and the fact that the private companies that hire them do not pay them on time.
What can I buy with 20 dinars? I need to buy clothes and send some money home, but I can't do anything with my low salary.
I worked for a large company. I've had it and decided to walk out.
A large number of these protesters, most of whom are from Bangladesh, demand that their salaries be increased, which they say are not enough to pay their bills due to inflation. This forced them to hold a strike and demonstrate. Some of them committed vandalism, which compelled the security forces to intervene.
Unfortunately, some of the private companies that bring these foreign workers do not give them their full rights. The companies take large sums of money from the government to do different projects, but they do not give these vulnerable workers their rights.
These events compelled one parliament member to call for an emergency session to discuss the issue of foreign workers, which has become a source of concern for Kuwaiti citizens at the political, security, and social levels. This is similar to what is happening in other Arab states in the Gulf.
Without a doubt, what is happening in Kuwait will affect the rest of the states in the Gulf. The ramification will be felt in the Gulf.
Some parliament members are threatening to question the Minister of Labor if his ministry fails to enforce a law pertaining to the failure of companies to pay their employees on time. The minister cut his vacation short and returned home from abroad to deal with the issue. Kuwaiti media described these events as the revolution of the hungry. Political observers are concerned that the Kuwaiti authorities may lose control if the recent events continue.
In Iraq, a joint operation in Diala province is underway. It's the U.S. and Iraqi military's latest operation against al-Qaeda in Iraq. Diala province is considered the last major area of insurgents resistance just outside the capital city of Baghdad. A ban on unofficial traffic has been ordered in the provincial capital, Baquba, in addition to numerous checkpoints.
Well, a day after a series of bombings killed dozens of people, hundreds of thousands of Iraqis have rallied right across the country.
Well, in northern cities, including Kirkuk and Erbil, Kurdish demonstrators protested against a delay in a new legislation.
While in Baghdad, huge crowds turned out for the climax of a major pilgrimage. Ayman Mohyeddin has more.
Tens of thousands of Iraqis defied the risk of a second day of attacks by holding rallies and processions across the country a day after bombs ripped through crowds across Iraq. In the northern city of Erbil, thousands of Kurds demonstrated against a draft provincial election law stalled in the Iraqi parliament because of a disagreement over how to share power in the oil-rich and ethnically contentious city of Kirkuk. On Monday, a Kurdish rally against the same draft law was the target of a deadly blast that left scores of people dead and more than 100 injured. The crowd of Kurdish protesters that were targeted turned their anger towards the office of the Turkmen political party, one of the parties behind delaying the provincial election law's approval in parliament. Turkmen officials blame the Kurdish authorities for not protecting them or their offices.
We put the responsibility on the governor of Kirkuk, who as the head of the Security Council and the security services did not prevent Kurdish protesters from doing this to our offices.
The bombings in Kirkuk on Monday, followed by the targeting of a rival political office, underscores how fragile relations are in that city, often considered as the center of ethnic fault lines in Iraq. Kirkuk was not the only Iraqi city rattled by violence on Monday, as thousands of Shiite pilgrims marched towards a holy shrine in the capital, Baghdad. 3 separate bombs went off, killing dozens. On Tuesday, authorities stepped up security as thousands participated for a second straight day in religious processions, defying the risk of yet another attack. While Tuesday's rally and religious procession passed without incident, the recent attacks undermine what American and Iraqi officials have touted as security gains in recent months. Ayman Muhyiddin, Al Jazeera.
A new scandal has been added to the U.S. occupation's rich file of corruption in Iraq. Hundreds of millions of dollars designated for the rebuilding of Iraq have been spent on questionable contracts and were covered up by the White House.
The U.S. Defense Department assigned a committee to investigate a $900 million contract in Iraq given by the U.S. military to build courthouses, prisons, and police centers. Hundreds of millions of dollars were wasted and were stolen. It was revealed that Parson Delaware, Inc., which was contracted to build 53 projects in Iraq, only completed a third of its contracted projects. According to the report compiled by Stuart Bowen, the Special Inspector General for Iraq Reconstruction, $142 million were spent on projects that were terminated, canceled, or neglected. One example of these thefts was the building of a prison in the area of Khan Bani Saad. The prison was turned over unfinished to the Iraqi government. The government does not plan to use this prison, which has cost $40 million so far. The contract is one of 10 contracts given by the U.S. military in 2004 to rebuild the infrastructure of Iraq, which is the pretext to steal Iraq's money. This corruption scandal is a reminder of another important scandal, that of U.S. Vice President Dick Cheney. Charles Smith, a civilian employee in the Pentagon, said that he was forced out of his job in 2004 when he refused to sign off on questionable payments of more than $1 billion to Kellogg Brown and Root Corporation. KBR is one of the subsidiaries of Halliburton, whose CEO was U.S. Vice President Dick Cheney. Smith said that after he was forced out of his job, another employee was hired who authorized most of the questionable expenses. The U.S. Department of Defense confirmed the widespread embezzlements of administrative corruption in Iraq. It considered this a persistent and lethal problem. It did not deny that the U.S. administration covers up these thefts under the pretext of protecting the government of Noor al-Maliki.
More than 1,500 people, including dozens of celebrities and officials, participated in the funeral procession of Youssef Chahine, one of the most renowned Arab filmmakers.
في حي الظاهر في القاهرة اليوم وكان جثمان شاهين قد وصل إلى الكنيسة في تابوت.
The funeral procession took place in the Roman Catholic Church of the Resurrection in Al-Zahir neighborhood in the heart of Cairo. Shahine's coffin, which was carried by a number of his relatives and students, was wrapped with an Egyptian flag.
في مشهد جنائزي مهيب ودعت السينما.
Arab and Egyptian cinema lost one of its brightest stars in 6 decades. A large funeral procession was held to say goodbye to 82-year-old Egyptian and international filmmaker Youssef Chahine. He passed away after being in a coma for weeks due to cerebral hemorrhage. The funeral procession was led by celebrities and officials who crammed into the Roman Catholic Church of the Resurrection in the heart of Cairo, where his coffin was wrapped with an Egyptian flag.
He was the largest symbol and a leader for many generations. He left behind many students and made many creative cinematic projects. All his work is of high quality and very creative. He will always be in our hearts, which is the natural place for a great filmmaker like Youssef Chahine.
He was very valuable. His death is a loss to all of us. He was my father, brother, and mentor. I used to consult him on everything. He is in my heart.
After the Cairo ceremony, Shahine's body was taken to his native city of Alexandria for burial. The Egyptian president released a statement saying that Shahine's unique contribution to filmmaking will always be in the hearts of the Egyptians, and his great work will be continued by his Egyptian students. The large funeral procession is an indication of how much Egyptians value his artistic contribution, which will always be a source of inspiration for filmmakers.
وكان مشوار يوسف شاهين في عالم السينما قد بدأ قبل 60 عاما.
Shahine's journey in the world of cinema started 60 years ago and resulted in more than 40 films. Most of his films were included in the list of Egypt's top 100 films. Many of his films won international awards. Shahine won a Lifetime Achievement Award at the Cannes Film Festival in 1997. Many of the films of the late director were political and reflected the concerns and social problems facing Egyptians. Film critics agree that some of Shahine's films are hard to forget.
Chahine was unique. He had a special talent. He was hardworking and loved the cinema and art. We can never forget his films, The Land, Salah al-Din, and The Iron Gate.
Despite his health problems, Youssef Chahine was always preoccupied with Egyptian affairs, which was reflected in his latest film, Chaos, which was released last year. For Al Madar program, Muhammad Abu Rihab, Abu Dhabi Television, Cairo.
Good evening. The fourth round of indirect peace talks between Syria and Israel opened in Turkey today. Sources in Jerusalem say good progress has been made and they expect direct talks between the sides to begin soon. However, Syrian officials strongly deny those reports. At the same time, senior Israeli officials say Syria has carried out a number of tangible measures in recent weeks that indicate it is taking talks with Israel seriously. A Western source has said that Damascus wants to make as much progress as possible with Prime Minister Olmert so that his successor will be bound to whatever Israeli commitments are made at this time. Israel will have a new government in the fall. Those were the fighting words of Foreign Minister Tzipi Livni as she broke her long self-imposed media silence on internal political affairs in a series of radio interviews this morning. Livni's move came shortly after her decision to hire a new team of political advisors, Eyal Arad, Reuven Adler and attorney Yoram Raved. The mythical team, dubbed the Ranch Forum, that brought former Prime Minister Ariel Sharon and Prime Minister Ehud Olmert to power. Asked what would happen if Olmert decides to run in the Kadima primaries, Livni said, "I'll beat him too." As for being a female contender, Livni said, "That has never affected my decisions or choices. I know," Livni added, "that it does make a difference to some people, and I find that amusing."
Hi, I'm Jamal Dajani, producer of Link TV's News Digest Mosaic World News from the Middle East. This election year has the potential to change the direction of U.S. foreign policy in the Middle East. With 30,000 American casualties and an untold number of Iraqi ones, we need this change more than ever. As you can see here, instead of increased news coverage of the war, there's been a sharp drop. Watching the news these days, you may think the war is over, but not if you watch Mosaic. Every day, Mosaic brings you an uncensored view of the Middle East from more than 36 broadcasters in the region. For us, the war isn't something that happens over there to others. It's something that affects all of us every day. And as long as that's the case, we promise to use our resources to bring you these uncensored stories. But we need your help to keep this promise. This is a critical time for Mosaic. We need to raise $200,000 in the next few months to keep this program on the air through December, to continue to send you our shows online and via podcast, to continue to produce the weekly Mosaic Intelligence Report. Call Link TV now at 1-866-485-8848 because you value Mosaic, or go online to linktv.org. We need to hear from you before the fall to keep Mosaic going. You're already watching Link TV, so I know you value what we bring: freedom of speech, the power of information, and access to news from a wide range of perspectives. This is the moment when we need it most. Don't wait any longer. Call Link TV now at 1-866-485-8848. Go to linktv.org. Thank you for your commitment and for making Mosaic part of your life.
Get more news about the Middle East online at linktv.org/mosaic. The Mosaic webpage offers a complete archive of Mosaic programs, program transcripts, the Mosaic Video Podcast, and the Mosaic Intelligence Report, a weekly analysis of the hottest stories from the Middle East. The views expressed on Mosaic are those of the participating broadcasters, not Link TV or its sponsors. The production of Mosaic is made possible with the support of viewers like you. Thank you.
This program was brought to you by Link TV for educational and non-commercial use only.
Link TV is the only U.S. television network devoted to global and national news, with uncompromising documentaries and diverse cultural programs. Programs which connect you to the world.